Welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. I'm Andrew Sumner, and we have a returning guest. The one, the only, Matthew Rosenberg is back in the house. Former Forbidden Planet New York staff member turned superstar author here at the actual flagship sort of home store, Forbidden Planet London. Good to see you again, brother. How have you been?
I've been good. Keeping busy, which is a good thing to do when you're a writer.
Wow. And you've been keeping very busy. And our last conversation was about your awesome new book out from Image, What's the Furthest Place from Here?
Yeah.
But this time around, we're going to jump back into a bit of your DC history, because we're talking about the Volume 1 collected edition of Batman Urban Legends, and this collected edition, which will be out in December, which you can pre-order from the links attached to this conversation. It features stories by yourself and your mate Chip Zdarsky, does it not, mate?
It does, yes. When the Batman Urban Legends book launched in single issues, it's an anthology book, and there were rotating stories. Is a big book. It's 80 pages, so there were rotating 10-page stories in every issue by awesome people about characters in Gotham, and then Chip and Eddie Barrows, who is my collaborator on Task Force Z and is an artistic genius. They did a Red Hood story that was 6 parts that was absolutely amazing. And me and Ryan Benjamin, who is, a classic Wildstorm artist and drew Grifter books back in the day, did Grifter, Grifter's time in Gotham. So we were doing the bad boys of Gotham next to each other. So yeah, so now we're in a trade together too.
I mean, there's so much connective tissue in what you've just said, it seems to me. As somebody who's read most of those books, it seems fascinating to me that you're talking about your artist on Task Force C, who was a genius artist, as you say, but his involvement is on a story with the Red Hood, which is a key factor of Task Force C itself, your new DC book, right? Which you talked about a while back on the show. And at the same time, your story involves Grifter, who is a character who's slotted into numerous aspects of what's now the DC universe, not the least of which, of course, is his kind of tangential involvement on the run-up to Sleeper with the Point Blank series that Ed Brubaker did. So there's a lot of richness there, and I'm trying to think, okay, which way should we go in first? I think, what was it like working on a character like Grifter, who's kind of bounced around, isn't massively identified for me, certainly with the core DC universe? I think of him as more of a fringe, Wildstorm character for obvious reasons.
Yeah, it's funny. When I came over to DC from Marvel, I was on the phone with Ben Abernathy, who's the head of the Batman office.
Sorry, hang on. Yeah. Guess what I've done? I don't think. Oh no, it did. You know what? I had a moment there. I thought I haven't pressed the record button, but it's all good. We are recording. Yeah, sorry, man.
Okay. Yeah. No worries.
In you go, mate.
All right.
I might just leave this in so the viewers at home can see behind the velvet curtain.
This is what it's really like.
Of how it goes down.
Yeah. So yeah, when I came over to DC, Ben Abernathy, who is the head editor of the Batman office, he called me and he was like, what do you want to be doing? And I went through a bunch of the standard answers. Everybody says, I want to write Batman. And he's like, yep, that's everybody. And then I was like, Robin, Nightwing. And I listed all those, like Batgirl, like all the answers you expect. And then he was like, tell me something else. Like, he's like, you're giving me the answer that literally everyone gives me. What else? And I was like, man, I was like, I love Green Arrow. I was like, I'd love to do Grifter. And he just was like, what did you say? And I was like, I'd love to do Grifter. And I didn't realize, but Ben was a Wildstorm editor. I mean, I guess I knew that in the back of my head, but he was a Wildstorm editor back in the day. And he was like, what do you want to do with Grifter? And I was like, well, I have a lot of ideas. I would love to put Grifter in Gotham. And he was like, I'm going to tell you a secret right now. And I was like, okay. And he was like, James Tynion is putting Grifter in Gotham in an upcoming issue of Batman. And he was like, don't tell anyone that. And I was like, what's he doing? And he's like, he's working for Lucius Fox. We can't talk about, we don't know why yet. And I was like, oh, wow, that's so rich. And he was like, think on that and come back to me. And so I called him the next day and I was like, hey, this is what I think you should be doing with Grifter. And he was like, I love it. Let's go. And I was like, okay, what should I do? And he's like, no, go start writing. Like, write me an outline right now. And I was like, oh, that's it. So, it was just this idea of like, it was spurred on a phone call of just like, what are the characters that I love that I think are really great? And I do love the Wildcats. I think they're just such great characters and so interesting. And I hate that they're not in play more, that they're not in books more. And so they were very much on my mind. And then to find out that they were very much on Ben's mind and very much on James's mind. And we just sort of all, it was this sort of serendipitous perfect storm of being able to like say the right thing at the right time when they were already in motion. And so, yeah, I just think like, he's such an interesting addition to Gotham. You know, he's not like the Red Hood, but he lands in a similar area in some ways, but he's got a sense of humor and he's funnier and he's like more irreverent. And he's, less guided by morals and principles. He's just such an interesting addition that like, you don't know where they're going to land on him, whether Batman will see him as a tool or something to stop. And that to me is really fun to add a new element to Gotham that really, brings questions. So
I think that's wonderful. I think for me, out of all of the characters within the DC universe, what Grifter has is a flavor of the 1970s, early 1970s thriller movie era. Like he's a character you could see, 1972 Steve McQueen from The Getaway playing,
for sure. Yeah. He has that Steve McQueen, Robert Redford feeling of just like, you like him, but he's too charming. It's dangerous how charming he is, kind of thing. I think he's really, that was one of the things that I really, I told them very early on. I was like, I need to get Grifter, Cold Cash face to face with Bruce Wayne, like not just Grifter mask versus Batman mask, but like those two guys. Like I need them to talk and interact. And that was really important to me because I was like, I need you to understand that like this isn't just a costume difference. This is a whole different type of person than we're used to seeing in Gotham. So yeah, I think I was so excited to really be able to flesh out who he is there a little more, and I think that, and fans really reacted to it in the way that I thought they would. People were really excited about it, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, what did you think about the art on the book when it was coming in real time when you created it?
I loved it. I mean, Ryan Benjamin, like his stuff is so, he feels like a classic Wildstorm artist, but not of an era. He feels timelessly like that, if that makes sense. And obviously Wildstorm has all different people, and Wildstorm to me in a certain way, like that classic era of Wildstorm is just prestigious artists where you just want to stare at their lines. Like there's no wrong lines. Everything is just sort of perfectly where it should be. And he's very much of that school, but like it feels like a very modern, cool book. And he really, he does action as well as anyone out there. And it was awesome to work with him. When Ben mentioned to him, I was like, oh yeah, I know his stuff from, the Wildstorm stuff. And then as soon as it started coming in, I was like, oh, I can't. Now he's like a definitive Grifter artist to me. Like clearly it's like Jim Lee, Travis Charest, Ryan Benjamin to me are like, that's the Mount Rushmore of Grifter artists. And so, that's a dream to get to work with someone like that.
Yeah, well said, mate. I think you've been tremendously fortunate with your collaborators. I think Travis Charest is a great shout out. Such a brilliant craftsman, also a genius. Sure. Are there any characters in this mix that you'd like to revisit in future, mate?
Yeah, I think when people read the story, I don't want to say too much for people who didn't pick it up, but at the end of the book, there are some people that Grifter is with. There's a bit of a team, and I think
I didn't want to say that explicitly,
sure,
which is obviously where my question was.
I'm not going to say it explicitly, but I think, yeah, I'd really like to see them come back, and I think next year's the 30th anniversary of certain books and certain comics existing, and maybe cool stuff will happen. I don't know.
So everybody who's listening to this oblique, but in fact very easy to decode conversation, go and check the book out, check the story out, and get to the end of the story, and it will all be revealed for you within Batman Urban Legends Volume 1. And I think there's a lot potentially to be excited about in those hints and aspirations. I think that would be fantastic. If something happens, that would be amazing.
I would be very excited if something happened.
Well said, brother. So Batman Urban Legends Volume 1, it's actually a beautiful edition. The Grifter story is an amazing piece of work. Matt always delivers, and he delivers again with this, and you can pre-order it from the links attached here. And mate, I know it's not going to be very long until we talk again, because we also, and I'll drop this as a teaser, we have your DC versus Vampires book to talk about. Yes. That you're creating with your mate James Tynan IV. And rather than steal everybody's thunder, all I will say is Matt and James will be back soon to talk about that book, and I very much look forward to it. You take care of yourself, brother. It's always a pleasure.
It was a blast. Thank you so much.
If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.